This is a 1992 Cabriolet.
And this is a 07K 5-cylinder out of a Mark V Jetta.
And we're gonna swap out this 8-valve 4-cylinder engine and automatic slush box transmission for the 2.5 cylinder with the manual transmission.
We're gonna do all of that in 24 hours.
Break. This Cabriolet is owned by Duncan, who runs our shop in North Carolina. He bought it for $1,800 from a woman who owned it for 20 years. He's already swapped the seats in this car because he is a giant who's incapable of fitting in a Mark I without modification of some kind. When we look over this car, the chassis of it is in pretty good shape. No major rust, dents, damage, and the top of this car is actually pretty new. Now, because Mark I have older engines in them, they often can be hard to find parts for. Duncan went with a 5-cylinder engine because it's a super reliable platform and allows him to take his Mark I on very long road trips. So now it's time to actually get the engine out of the car, and we're gonna start by taking off the hood.
Do we have a place to put this? So this is a 1.8 liter naturally aspirated 8-valve 4-cylinder engine, common to this vintage of Volkswagen. Nothing real special about it, pathetically slow.
Oh God.
Do you have a drip tray? I made a mistake. Just in the nick of time. Whew. A catastrophe averted.
We're like 12 seconds into working, and we've already made a mess.
If you spend as much time working as you did complaining.
No, that's true. I should work more.
I haven't worked on a Mark I
since the Scirocco.
So long. Now you're dealing with stuff that's old. Look at how broke this electrical connector is. So it's old, and it's probably been manhandled in a very...
like Charles.
Just
old
like
and manhandled?
Old and manhandled. So we're gonna save all this stuff because there's one special person out there that is gonna get Paul coming to their house to do a 1/8 swap on whatever. So he's gonna need these things. So there is a lot of lines. Some of them are electrical lines, AKA wires. This is a speedometer cable, I believe. Some of them are coolant lines, some are vac lines. So this also had vacuum operated cruise control. Power locks, I think these were also vacuum operated power locks. Most of that crap.
It's about to be a mess. Nope, no mess. Not a drop, not a single drip.
I drained it out of the bottom, thankfully.
Thank you, great work.
You're welcome, guys. You're welcome.
The condenser is kind of stuck on it. I would like to spike this on the ground.
Is making messes, coolant on the floor. It's all slippery.
Well, it's only fair. Charles made one mess, and I made another mess.
At least mine was just under the car, not in the middle of the floor.
That is true.
No, it looks like somebody rattle canned up in here because you can see the heater, the HVAC boxes
it's been oversprayed.
And,
this is what happens when you paint cars without like pulling everything apart. Is you just overspray on whatever's particularly in your way.
It's gonna take longer than 24 hours.
While Charles and I are working on pulling the engine, Duncan is over here working on getting the engine freshened up. There's a bunch of maintenance parts because of mileage on this thing, so he's gonna get this thing in order while we get that in order. That will maximize our efficiency to make sure we can get this car done today.
So we'll be replacing this old manifold here with a new header, so that way we don't have to fabricate our own downpipe. This has another section that jays down underneath the car and will then connect to any Tectonic or Magnaflow or any other Mark I catback. Now on top of the functionality, it also looks way better too. So what that means is we're gonna replace all these crusty old studs with nice new titanium ones. That way we have fresh hardware and fresh gaskets. Slide it in. Don't know, I've never actually seen plugs that bad, to be honest with you. Because it's a 2.5 and nobody with 2.5s does maintenance, they're just the original plugs. So this is our new valve cover. And we're replacing this because of the oil filter housing that we're going to replace later. And it effectively gets rid of the PCV and the ugly plastic valve cover that we had. So I actually had Lee, our service advisor, here at the shop, powder coat both of these sections and my engine hooks. This lower part is the valve cover that we got from i5, and it comes with this top part here. And what that does is it spaces and locates the coil packs.
So we put the engine brace on top. We are planning to try to drop it out the bottom. So we're gonna start doing that now. You said you were coming until you told me to stop. Keep going. Come on now.
This is the transmission side mount, right here. Here's why I'm feeling so good. Because tomorrow at 6 o'clock, I'm going home whether it's done or not. Sorry guys. Hasta luego.
Right now it's sitting on 2 pallets and some tires, or a tire. Not a tire, but a tire. You don't get the joke?
A tire.
A tire, clothes you wear. What you wear, that's your attire. And a tire is underneath of there.
Paul, we also need to watch this back corner over here.
Well, then you stay there. Are you good there, Duncan? Okay. Right now we're going up where we're trying to make sure we don't damage anything on the way out.
Everybody ready?
Yeah, got it.
Going up?
Yeah. Now that the engine's out of the car, one of the things we have to do is assess from this car what we're keeping that's going to transfer over to the engine and what's not. Charles pulled all this stuff out. This is going to be trash, so that's going away. But we have to go one by one with each item to try to figure out what we are keeping and what we're not. For example, this right here is the fuel line that comes from the fuel pump and provides fuel to your engine. We will either need to change this and make it adapt to what we need, or we can hopefully potentially just reuse this one, boop, put it right on the engine. Here's the front mount for the 1.8 engine that came out of this car. It has a ball here that sits inside that cup. This isn't needed because our mounts are going to be completely different, so we're going to be removing that. This goes to the old fans. This is a thermal switch that turns on the fans. This is the fans itself. This is all going to have to get modified because the fans are going to be completely different on this car. So this will be cut and we'll probably wire into this stuff.
So Duncan did a really great job on putting some new idler pulleys, a new water pump, and new tensioner on our 2.5. The other key piece of the puzzle for this engine is going to be our hydraulic power steering pump. So this is actually the pump from the Cabriolet. This is the pump that was on the 2.5. And unfortunately, the fittings are different. So what we were trying to do is figure out how we could make the stuff that we have actually work in the car. So we installed the Cabriolet pump on the 2.5, which was no problem, bolted right up. The only issue would be is our pulley actually makes contact in a couple of spots here on the pump and then the back side of the bracket. So we cut down, this is so ingenuitous, we cut down the pulley that was on this pump. So now this guy sits on there like that. This is gonna act as a spacer to get our pulley away from the bracket as well as oriented in proper line with the rest of our pulleys on our serpentine belt circuit. And so it's gonna sit in there just like that. So now we can run all the factory lines from the Cabriolet and the factory pump from the Cabriolet, and we might need a little bit longer bolts.
Now, mounting this engine obviously is going to be different. So here is the mount from S&P. You can see it bolts to the back of the engine here and then to the side of the engine here using the factory mounting location from a Mark 1 right here. Now we're looking at a trans mount. Here's the S&P mount. It mounts like so. Here's the factory mount. This one gets removed and then we go on here. And then you can bolt it straight through there. You have a bolt run through here and then a nut that holds on the other side. Because of that, we actually have to drill out this threads on this, and that will allow us to get our bolt all the way through with a nut. This is a vacuum pump for the engine. This provides extra vacuum when the brake booster runs out of vacuum and the engine doesn't have it. It was deleted on this engine before. We don't like that. We think it's dumb. We think it's not smart. We think it's stupid. Now, a lot of people do these deletes because the delete kit is way cheaper than buying a vacuum pump that's leaking oil all over the top of your car. I don't like it because there could be circumstances that could lead to no power brakes. For example, if you have wide open throttle, your engine doesn't make vacuum, you pump the brakes a couple times, you no longer have power brakes. This could happen on a track or an extreme driving situation. Is it unlikely? Yes, but still possible you have no power brakes under some circumstances. So we don't like that. Be safe, people. So all we do is unbolt that, put a vacuum pump back on it, and then we're gonna attach this to our brake system. Now we gotta talk about this slave cylinder. This is the Mark IV one that comes out of the O2J trans. This is the one that is from S&P. Duncan is opting for the hydraulic version of this because it is awful when you do it any other way. If you remember, we did the Scirocco with the manual cable, and it was awful to drive. So don't do manual ones. It's not fun. You won't like it, don't do it. That was a slave cylinder on the transmission. We will later show you the master cylinder that goes underneath the dash, and then it'll have a hydraulic line that connects the two.
This part right here is our oil filter housing. Our oil filter lives down here, our cooler is right here, we have a PCV line here, and then there's some oil and coolant passages. One, these are actually prone to leak. So it's not a bad idea to do his maintenance anyway, but really the main problem is, unless Duncan wants to drop the engine out of the car every time he changes the oil filter, he can't use this because this actually rests up against the front body of a Cabriolet. So enter this beautiful bad boy right here. This is going to allow us to use a screw-on filter from like a 1.8 turbo GTI. It's got a bunch of ports on it if you wanted to run like a oil cooler, like a remote one. We have our oil pressure switch and then fittings for if you had boost. We're not boosted, so we're not worried about those. And this guy's gonna live right back here. Because we're using this, we had to run a block off here for a coolant line, because we're not running our oil cooler. He'll probably run one at some point. So we have to really have that oil filter housing upgrade, but that cascades into a bunch of other things we need to do, like plug this port right here in our intake manifold. You can kind of see it down here. That also means we are going to install this very dope and sexy valve cover with a cool little brace that's fancy boy colored, and a catch can, which will go in, the line will go right here.
Clean it up. So happens, it's like 30 years of pine needles that you get stuck in every crevice of your car.
You're filming? Are you filming my butt? I don't know how this always ends up, but I always get this spot.
I just want to go on record, say that was real crappy.
Charles just took the dash out of the car because we have to access the pedal cluster. He had a real son of a gun of a time. It
was a nutty fudgekins.
And he got it out. So we are gonna swap these pedals, and Duncan and I are gonna test fit this engine while Charles does that.
I did it. This is our brake pedal assembly without a clutch pedal. And we are getting rid of this guy in favor of this guy. One stoppy boy, one clutchy boy.
You did it. I knew you could do it. You don't want an automatic Cabrio. The ladies would never go for that. This is our radiator. And it has fans on it. So we got to mount it in here. If we look, this goes here like so, and the coolant hoses go here and here. And we have to put this in before the engine goes in because there's no space otherwise. But the problem with that is we don't know where to put it. See, it could go here, it could go here, it could go further back, it could go further forward, and we can't know exactly where to put it until we know where the engine's gonna be. We gotta test fit the engine so that we could mount the radiator.
I don't know, dog.
Doesn't even look close, man.
Not even close. We are going to pull the transmission off of the engine.
So clearance is an issue with the transmission. So we have to cut this piece right here. So we're gonna be trimming it out. Him.
I was considering it.
I hate that, Charles. Okay. He's gonna do it as soon as I start talking again. I know it. I know it. Okay. Right here, we have to remove this part of the fender well, and that is because we have to clear the transmission. So I'm gonna use my favorite tool to cut it. One cut down. Doesn't look good, it looks great. No clue, we're gonna find out.
It is a stage 5 purple flywheel pressure plate.
A purple pressure plate.
Did real good work on that trans.
D's.
I think it looks pretty good. Let Duncan be the judge. Let Drunken be the judge.
Drunken? Oh, that looks pretty mediocre.
I'd have cut it up further.
Got a little smoke up top too, I like it.
With everything prepped, we're now ready to drop our engine in. With the transmission off, we were able to have enough space to go in from the top. But we did have some clearance issues that we had to be careful when going in around the brake lines. Overall, this wasn't terribly difficult, but we had more difficulties to come.
What the problem is you have one mount that we're trying to get lined up. So you have the tube in the mount, you have the bracket for the body, and then you have the bolt that goes through it. And you gotta get all those lined up while the engine's rocking and moving, and it can be pretty tricky. Plus it's a really, really tight fit on top of all that. So I think they got the bolt in, and now they gotta get it threaded into the, we're not out of the woods yet.
Are you tired?
Yeah, I mean.
We're kind of mocked up in here in the engine bay. We're working on where the radiator is gonna be, so we're gonna place this guy. We drilled our holes to mount these tabs underneath. Right here is one of the mounting studs we ran. This was an existing body hole that we're using, and then we just ran a collar down on top of it to keep that bolt from underneath in place. And then the plan is to be able to drop our radiator on top of those, put some rubber washers in place to isolate it, and then everything will be mounted in place perfectly. This was a factory radiator hose. All we did was clip off maybe like a section about yay big. We're gonna put this on and test fit it to see if it's gonna be exactly what we need. And it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that placement. We may have to trim a little more here later, but overall, win. This is our fans. It's not that there's a major clearance issue, but it's a little snugger than we like. Yeah, if we had a single round car or a square car, you'd be able to slide over even further, which would be my preference. I feel like we have to kind of understand where the trans needs to be next. Otherwise,
Just leave this in here.
I kind of feel like that's what's going to have to happen. So really, here's the way I'm going to count it. One day is going to be 24 hours. So 12 hours today, 12 hours tomorrow, one day. If we get it done by tomorrow, it's one day. This blue wire here is for the trigger wire for the alternator. When you do repairs in cars, you twist them together, put wire nuts on it like it's your home electrical system, and you don't care if your car sets on fire. So what we're doing in this case is getting rid of our wire nut, because that's not an approved repair from Home Depot Motorsports, and then we are going to use this plug that we had for the alternator. We splice them together, we plug this in, bada bing, bada boom, we got a charging system.
All right, so here's what I've been working on for like the last 900 hours. And other than seeing this, it doesn't look any different at all. But we have the full hydraulic clutch setup in the car now, which in my opinion, if you're gonna do this kind of swap, do a hydro setup, it's much better. Our slave cylinder is tucked back behind here. And for context, if our dash were in, our instrument cluster would sit right about here. The negative of this being here is we had to eliminate a duct, which is somewhere around here for the vent. That's here on the driver's side. Fill the reservoir. We got to mount it. And then we're going to have to bleed the whole clutch system, which is going to be a little bit tricky with all this kind of buried up. It would be impossible if we had the dash in. So we'll get all that set up, then we'll put the dash in. I do wish I would have looked at the hydraulic clutch before I put the clutch pedal in. I gotta tell you, I've been in this car underneath this dash for a lot of hours. I'm happy that I get to come out of my little hole here for a while.
Didn't you do this on the Jetta?
I did do this on the Jetta. But what Paul doesn't know about the Jetta is I set him up. I did it wrong. Oh, hey.
I know he did it wrong because I had to fix a bunch of mistakes he made.
Yeah, well, you gave him the worst job.
I did give him the worst job. So to be fair, he sabotaged
Karma
me.
is Paul's boyfriend.
Yeah, that is his name.
I also want to point out I had this little section over here where I was working, and they just came over here and just destroyed it with this other crap, just piled it right on where I was working. It's like, cool guys, thanks. The table over there, the 2 roll carts is not enough. They got to have this area too.
I was running out of tables that were clean. Here's just the only one left.
Get under the dash, Charles. You want a workspace? Nah, suck it. This is our workspace. I'm your workspace now.
You may be working at home in a small garage and you're like, man, it's so cluttered, I'm out of space. We have a 5-bay shop and we have managed to put stuff in every place possible.
Okay, next up we're gonna put the shifter cable into our Cabriolet. We have this bracket that's going to mount right where the factory shifter did. This hole, and this hole are where the automatic shifter box mounted up. And then these 2 holes are going to mount to the box, which Pauly D has right there. So we'll get 2 bolts that go in those top holes. Now the right side holes right there.
So I'm gonna slide this underneath the car. Charles is gonna get that bracket in place, and then
it's gonna be low because it's mounting at the bottom of the floorboard. But that's probably good for Duncan. I couldn't even reach it. I could reach the brake pedal, not the gas pedal. Definitely not the clutch.
So before we could put the radiator in, Duncan got the battery cable stuff done. And the reason why this had to happen is because this goes from the battery to the starter, but then it also goes from the starter to the alternator. And so that had to be done before we put the radiator in, because otherwise it's gonna be very difficult to access. So daisy chain together, go to our battery. Now we're ready to put our radiator in. S&P has this nice thing you can just bolt right to their radiator, which is also theirs. You have to have something slim like this to fit in, because otherwise you will not be able to clear the engine. So we got to go in like this, push our engine back, and you can see how snug this is. Without these super slim fans, you're never going to clear. Now for context, you can see this is how deep the other fan is. So there's no way you could fit this in there.
Paul's pumping up the transmission. We are about to mate the 2.5 with the O2J. And I think this is gonna probably be the worst part of this whole entire job. I'm convinced. So I'm just gonna stand here and watch Paul. We have no room, and it's a bad angle.
The control arm bracket here, which is part of the body of the car. So we're worried that that's gonna be a major issue. We're about to find out. It's actually going better than I expected.
Shut the up.
Charles, I forgot, Charles worries about being...
Just shut your mouth. Well, here's the problem.
What's the problem?
The brake lines.
Oh. The trans can't get any further back. The fact that this is like, there's no subframe in these cars is what makes stuff like this such a pain. You can't pull all the control arm and suspension mounting points out because they're just part of the body. You see how far this has to get inside of here?
The body, the power steering lines.
The brake lines, power steering lines right there. We're close. I also can just use a pry bar to bend it out of the way. All right, now we're past.
Okay.
Now we can go up?
Yep. Well, I didn't do a good enough job cutting now, so I gotta recut. Round 3, here we go.
He's getting wild and crazy. Okay, settle down there, big boy.
Sorry. Got a power steering line issue now. Charles has confidence that
I wouldn't try and loosen
clocking the lines.
The
only clock that I'm worried about is...
Bub Rub's alarm clock. Woo woo!
I don't know what he just said.
You know Bub Rub, little sis. Whistle tips?
Did you say whistle tits?
All right, well that's better.
Is it better?
Facelifted 3.
Now we're gonna take an interlude to watch Bub Rub and Lil Sis
Well, let's get this.
with whistle tips.
Let's get the trans splined on there, whistle tits. We're pretty close. Where are we at with?
I just need this to happen. That's what I need.
Oh,
that's what needed to happen. I feel like we're working against each other.
I mean,
The top's got to go up.
I know that's what I was trying to do, and then you're like, "You're not doing a good job." And
No,
I was like,
I
"All
just
right,
felt like
fine."
we were working against each other.
There we go. We did it.
Duncan, get a bolt.
Do it. We did it so
We're
much.
so there.
I'm so proud of us. We're in the home stretch now.
We're where we should have been yesterday at
Well, we're where we should have been yesterday at like 10:30, but like
6 o'clock.
we are where we are. You get what you get.
You're not unburdened by what has become the past.
We are now unburdened about what we were formerly burdened by.
Just putting a little grease in our axle here.
Did they not come pre-greased?
They didn't come pre-greased, which is not a big deal. Just messy.
This is our pendulum mount. This is the last thing we need to install for the engine mounts. It keeps the engine from rocking back and forth when you drive the car. So it goes in here like so. You kind of rock it in place, just like that. On this side, you take out a transmission bolt, and then it goes in place like that. So engine's mounted in. We ran into a few hiccups along the way, but overall, looks amazing. Check it out.
So we have our axles in, all of our engine mounts are bolted up, the engine's in its new home, and now it is time for me to get out of here, let these guys finish up 800,000 little details, because contrary to popular belief, I do not live here.
Duncan's been working for a while to get everything cleaned up. Everything is laid out very loosely. It's just bleh and bleh. He's got the wiring mostly in place for us to try to crank this car over. We actually have the skills to build our own harness. With the Jetta, we clearly did build our own harness, but the time required is significant. So even though we have the skills, getting a harness like this that Sal already has, that basically you get a harness, it just says hook it up to here and hook it up to here and hook it up to here, and then you just start car instead of spending probably 30 or 40 hours backtracking through wiring and stuff like that.
So when we pulled the drain plug on the engine, just to make sure there wasn't any old oil in it from the junkyard, found a bunch of nasty, watery, orange stuff, so maybe coolant. So I've got a couple of quarts of Fram oil that have been here forever. We're just gonna run it through with the drain plug out. That way we can attempt to kind of push out the rest of that stuff that's just laying in the bottom of the pan.
Okay, so this is the bottom part of our downpipe. This is the S&P downpipe. And manifold assembly. Looks very pretty. We're just going up with our V-band just like this, and you can see you have this 3-bolt flange here. Duncan got a Tectonics cat back to go with that. So we have an adapter that's gonna go here, then we're gonna go Tectonics the rest of the way back. So we're trying to figure out our situation with these shift cables to make sure we have enough clearance and everything else. We're gonna try to crank it. We're out of gear so we don't run Duncan over or hit something. Nothing, hold on. Was this all unplugged? Whenever you run into an issue like this, first thing you have to do is try to backtrack through, number one, what you've disconnected, and if there's something that you have to reconnect. Now, we had 3 people involved in this, so that's an absolute show. Number 2, you go back to basics of making sure that everything that is supposed to have power does have power, and everything supposed to have ground has ground. Okay? That means the starter doesn't have ground.
There is not a ground running from the engine to...
Yep, that's what I told you.
I was gonna make one earlier and I did not.
Yeah. Again. Sounds good. Now that our car cranks, we're gonna try to get it to start. First thing we have to do is hook up the fuel pump or the fuel system, but this is an important part of that. Now at the back of the car is the other fuel filter for the vehicle. This is gonna get mounted underneath the hood because the lines are kind of sketchy and we don't wanna mess with it. So this is gonna look like right here. It's gonna go just like so. We're gonna run this fuel line here, and then right here, this goes back and regulates the fuel pressure through this system. If you look, it says 4 bar right there. This is what regulates the fuel pressure to the 2.5 engine, because the factory Mark 1 stuff will actually over-pressurize this system, and this will make sure that we have the appropriate pressure. This is a factory 2.5 car fuel filter. Charles didn't install this right, so I'm taking it back out. Sorry, I was so focused on the fact that Charles made a massive mistake. He installed this without cutting the studs off the shift box. So you gotta cut them flush so this can sit against the body of the car. So here we go. Yeah, it doesn't smell great. Don't worry about that. Sometimes you gotta be careful and make sure you don't catch things on fire. We now need to wire up our fuel pump. Right here is relay 80, that's the fuel pump relay. We went to the back of this disaster fuse panel, we pulled out the big white connector, we went to this black connector, and we found our wire. We powered it with our power probe to verify that it was correct. Once we verify we have the correct wire, it's red with a yellow stripe. We are going to then wire this to Sal's harness that tells you basically, here's your fuel pump wire. All you do is wire it from there into here. Now you also have to pull the 80 relay, because once you clip that wire, you don't want to leave a hot wire hanging out in the back of your dash. So take your 80 relay, you chuck it in your passenger floorboard, you say, see you later, 80. To mount this pedal on the floor, what Sal has noted on his stuff is you lop this pedal bracket off at the bottom here, and then over here, and you should be able to mount it to the floor through the bolt right here. This is a Mark 5 pedal that you just plug and play, boop, and then bolt to your floor. These are steering rack bushings that Duncan got because he wants to have a race car. So we're replacing these. We also have to take the steering rack down to route the shift cables over top of it. When we look at our shifter box right here, we have the cables that run up right here through the steering rack. We're having clearance issues right here where it goes through the steering rack. There's power steering lines in the way. So we are gonna hammer the body right here quite a bit. Try to clear it as much as possible for the cables to not bind up. And then we should be able to actually move this car in and out under its own power. It goes front to back and side to side. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. Reverse. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. key's out. The key's out. The key's out. It doesn't turning off. I don't know. The car didn't turn off, so we have to figure out. Oh, because he's got to turn 15. We wired the ignition to the battery to get it to start. That's why. Now we're gonna run it for a little bit longer, and I let it idle for a minute or so. Maybe not, probably not a minute, but a little bit longer.
Dr. Frankenstein right now. Because I'm holding the lifeline.
Yes. Just like that. We've officially made a 2.5 run. Wait, we got no exhaust attached to it. It's just header back, or straight out of a header right now. So, unsurprisingly, it's very loud. Okay, cat back exhaust going on. We're gonna stick it up. Hopefully it's gonna go great. We're not sure once we pull all this up if this is gonna hit or not, so we're about to find out when we get the rest of this.
I think it goes on top. Yeah.
Yeah, you think it's so? Like this?
Yeah.
I made that mistake, and now I hear the internet tell me that I installed a sway bar wrong for the past 2 months. When we swapped it on Charles' car, I installed it with the sticker right side up, and then it turned out the sway bar was upside down, and now I get criticism on the internet.
And installed our front sway bar upside down. You can see how this piece sort of curves down. They're actually supposed to curve up.
I said this wasn't gonna be this way, and it turned out I was right. This was upside down. Because now I'm second guessing myself ever since the sway bar gate happened. So this right here we've discovered is hitting the body of the car. So we're gonna try to remove a bunch of this material from this front portion of the box so that it can clear and go all the way up into the car. In addition, you can see we removed this tab here. You can see this kind of square like that before we removed that. And then I ground into here and I cut off this tab here. It looks like that in the back. And the reason why is because it has issues with clearing the exhaust. So when the exhaust goes up, it was hitting against that. Now that we've installed our catback exhaust, we want to start it up to see how it sounds because the last one was just a header. Dun, dun, dun. It sounds good. It's probably blown out because it's probably way too loud back here. We're gonna get this baby off of stock ride height, and as with many of our builds, Solowerks sent us a set, and if you're looking for an affordable set of coilovers, these are an awesome option. Solowerks, found at shoptap.com. Buy them now. That's what we call overspray. If you paint your car at a place, they'll give you a free coil and spring paint to go with your body paint on your car. At no charge, not a single dime they charge you more. They'll paint your transmission and brake rotors too if you want them to. So this is how you guarantee safety when you call about spring compressors. Because now he can zing that off. He can freely zing it with no concern. With reckless abandon. See, that's all he needed was some tension. And then we go up. This is a real neat tool. Just like Charles. We're tightening the strut tops down, and if you don't know, you need the special tool. Otherwise, you can't do it. Found at shoptap.com exclusively, especially we're using a 22 nut because it came with 23s, but we don't have a 23 tool. If you need a 23 tool, don't go to shoptap.com because there won't be one there. There we have 19, 18, 21, 22. That's it. Moving on to the control arms. They are kind of old, kind of gross looking, and the ball joint bolts are all like weird. So Duncan got new ones, got some poly bushings. He's got those purple hot boy bushings. He's gonna be the hottest. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. See how yucky that is? Look at that.
What's wrong with that?
Now that we're done with our coilovers, we're ready to make it look better, not just in stance, but in wheels. This is the original 14-inch snowflake that came on this car. And guess what? We are putting on some nice 16-inch snowflakes, RML wheels. Brad, my boy, hooked us up with these. 16 by 8, I believe. So RML designed these wheels as an upsized snowflake to kind of give you the same look as a snowflake, which is kind of a classic Volkswagen look, but do it in sizes that makes the car have the appropriate stance, aesthetic, and everything else, which is, it's a pretty aggressive setup for a Mark 1, but we think it's gonna look real cool. Wheels are on. We had some clearance issues, not surprising. Moment of truth, we're gonna see what it looks like on the ground. I think it looks awesome. I think these wheels are absolutely perfect for the car. We're gonna leave the rim protectors on for now, in case there's any parallel parking that happens with this thing. We have a lot of work to do in this engine bay, mostly Duncan, but I'll help him a little bit. There's a lot of cleanup to do. All this wiring has to be buttoned up. The cooling system has to be buttoned up. We're not going to show you every detail of that, so you'll come back to us once it looks presentable. To start with cleaning up the engine bay, Duncan started to wrap all the wiring and got rid of all the unnecessary factory wiring that was in the Cabriolet to begin with. Duncan also installed a catch can, which was required because this valve cover deleted all the PCV hoses. We also have the power steering right here. The reservoir is mounted in a factory mounting location, and we are using the Mark 1 pump on the 2507K bracket with the Mark 1 line. So that worked out beautifully. When we look at our fuel line here, as you can see, we previously talked about the fuel filter being located here. Duncan relocated that to the back to make more space here and keep it cleaner. As you can see here, this is where the oil filter is, and that bracket we installed, and you can see the clearance here is because of that bracket, and if not, the oil filter would be sticking out right into this. Now this intake right here was built as a temporary intake in the parking lot of a parts store. The future could potentially hold more part store intakes or a heat shield that gets fabricated and looks nice. You decide. Right here is our brake reservoir. Now Duncan did have to get new lines because on the timing cover side, the brake lines actually physically would hit the timing cover, which obviously is a problem if you'd like to have brakes. Coolant bottle on this car is a Mark III. As you can see it's kind of gooky right now because it's been flushed a few times because this engine has some gook in it. It has SMP's adapter that holds that in so that you can mount that nicely and keep a factory mounting location. After Duncan got all the wiring worked out, he got the battery cables fitted, he got the circuit breaker mounted, he's got our ground cable here, and you got the battery mounted in the front. So there is space for a battery in the front on this swap, but you could choose to mount it in the front or the back, but this makes life a lot easier. Now we can see the wider view of this car and the wheels. I think I love these wheels. And Duncan raised it up a little bit from where we originally had it to get the stance kind of normal so we can drive it on a regular basis and have it be a comfortable ride. Now we look at the interior. Duncan has done a ton of work to get this interior cleaned up. He got rid of the white interior, white center console, white dash, all those pieces, and swapped away black dash. He also did a bunch with the cluster to get all the Tach adapter and the Speedo from S&P, convert signals to a usable Mark I cluster. The Speedo uses a cable that converts from the O2J into this cable and actually spins. It spins and it just spins just like it's supposed to. This car also has our shift knob on it. As you may be aware, we recently produced a shift knob, and we don't have an adapter currently for older model cars, which would be Mark 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this has a prototype adapter. Basically, it clamps onto it. Older cars have a skinnier rod. If you're a new guy, you got a fat rod. If you're an old guy, you got a skinny rod. Couldn't clamp on. So this one has an adapter that's a prototype. As you can see, very securely on there. Now the car is complete, and during this video, you can see this car has come a long way. It went all the way from this to this. Thank you so much for watching. I think the car came out awesome. Hopefully you think it came out awesome. I hope Duncan thinks it came out awesome because it's actually his car. Charles isn't here. Forget about Charles, who cares? Bye.